good afternoon, members. Hope you had a good summer.
You might want to advise people of the likely course of events because there's people here for this item.
Yes.
I think it's fairly early, isn't it? Yeah.
Was it?
I think it's up early-ish.
Okay, members, just over the course of the summer, Keith McBride had a little success at the promotion boards and has left the committee, so can I, on your behalf, formally thank him for everything he's done for us. Karen Jardine, who was with us on, I think, a temporary basis, is now going to take over the role performed by Keith. So we wish you well. And Kathy has come in as our new clerk. So you're very welcome.
Thank you.
And we wish you well. And Susanna at the back. Lachkova, I think is the correct pronunciation. Again, Susanna is a new member of our staff. So Stephen, I think, is the only continuity there, no pressure. Thank you very much, members. We've apologies from Brenda Hale and Bronwyn McGann. Are we aware of any other things?
That's of he who is stuck on the lung bypass.
Yes.
Mr. Mutri.
Mr. Mutri is en route. And any other? No, okay. Members, thank you for those of you who managed to make it last week to our strategic planning session down in Dungannon. I think it was very worthwhile, good structure to it. The committee staff have prepared the short paper at page 3 of your packs, which detail the outcomes of that session. That's your table papers at page 3. Can I pause in case anybody has any specific comment? In the absence of which, I would ask you if you are content to agree the strategic priorities and operations for this term 2014-15.
Agreed.
Thank you. Secondly, are we content to publish on our committee webpage?
Yep. Agreed.
Okay, thank you. The NIPSO Bill team, I think, have contacted members, as we discussed last week, to arrange informal briefings before it comes back next week. On a party basis, Leslie and I met with Alan earlier this week. I think we find that useful in terms of clarifications. Could I just encourage the other groupings, if they could avail of that opportunity? Page 5, members, you've got a copy of the committee's current invitations. Page 6, an invitation from Collaboration NI to an event providing an overview of supply chains as a model of collaboration. I have been invited by the Assembly Community Connect to a dinner with chief executives from the third sector. That's the 7th of October in the Long Gallery, and it's part of our ongoing engagement strategy as an Assembly. The chairs of health and social development committees will also be there, and the invitation and further details are on page 9 to 13 in your electronic packs, and the list of organisations attending is at page 14. Can I ask if you're content that I attend that on behalf of the committee? Thank you. Page 15 then, correspondence from the Chair of the Committee for Culture, Arts and Leisure, inviting the Deputy Chair and myself to attend a briefing with the BBC Director General, Lord Hall, on Wednesday the 8th of October in room 115. Again, are you content that Chris and I attend?
Great.
Thank you. Next, draft minutes of our meeting of the 2nd of July 2014, beginning at page 18 of your pack. So you content to agree the draft minutes?
Agreed.
Thank you. Matters arising then. During recess, I received a letter from Playboard NI. They wanted to express concern that departmental briefings and updates on the progress of the Delivering Social Change framework largely fail to reflect the 7th signature programme, which is for play and leisure. And on my request, committee staff forwarded the letter to the department for comment. The department responded on the 20th of August, and that correspondence is at page 26. It advises ministers remain committed to the importance of promoting and providing opportunities for children and young people to enjoy their play and their leisure. In the absence of comment, members, could I suggest that we copy the department's response to Playboard NI?
Agreed.
Thank you. Then page 31 is a response from the department following the committee's queries relating to PFG Commitment 16 and Commitment 26. We're being advised with regard to the one plan, OFMdFM, DETI and ILEX are working on a jobs subgroup along with Derry City Council, DEL and DCAL to collect data to measure jobs promoted and created. Information has also been provided on the jobs promoted in the year 12-13. And then with regard to Commitment 26, the Executive's drawdown of competitive EU funds, the Department has provided further info on the themes and locations of the Barroso Task Force Working Group European Policy Seminars. Are we content to note?
Chair, can I just raise a comment on item 4.3? The response makes comment in relation to Community Relation in Schools Buddy Programme, which is a project that takes in Edenderry Nursery School and Holy Cross Nursery School in North Belfast. The report from the department correctly says that the Department in Atlantic Philanthropies under the Contested Space Interface Programme 11 to 14 funded this programme. Fund 2014 will show funding has ceased. So it's my understanding that it's been an extremely successful programme, bringing children and men and women together across that tense interface area. But the Community Relations in School has met with the Department and the Department of Education and had no direction as to what future funding would be available for the continuation of that scheme. The report here says that the Department of Education is taking forward the commitment set out in Together Building a United Community to roll out the buddy scheme and for all publicly funded nursery and primary schools. But at this moment in time, that project is under real threat because it has no clear direction. Would it be possible for us to hear from the organisation, given our focus on the inquiry into building a united community?
Members?
I think it'd be worthwhile inviting them to the committee in some format.
Agreed.
I'm not against doing that, but I'm just concerned where it's fit in terms of maybe have 20 other organisations would have an equally confused state and anxious position to be in. And if we're doing an inquiry, where do we fit that in? So do we open the door to bring a lot of people in? So we have to make that choice, I think.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I have no difficulty hearing the concerns.
Yep.
I just want a framework within which we do it properly, so that others they have similar concerns, how they're heard.
Jimmy?
I tend, Chair, to agree with Alex. I mean, it does open the door to other organisations, and just simply the programme. Is it not a job for maybe yourself and the Deputy Chair and any member who's interested to meet them and hear what the issues are?
Yep, I think if you're content, Chris, in the first instance, I'd be more than happy. You and I meet along with anybody who wants to. And as we put some flesh under the bones of how we take forward the inquiry, clearly this group goes into the pool from which we will invite organisations to come and give us the expert witness. Yeah. If we're content with that approach.
Would we write Chairman to the Department of Education and just seek their assurance that that's being considered? Would that be too direct?
Or we'd have to write to the Committee
Aye.
for Education.
Yeah, I mean, to build on Leslie's comments, Chair, if that's okay, we could, it says the Department of Education is taking forward the commitment. We could write to ask in what way, or for an update on progress in relation to that.
Be the Committee for Education.
Oh yeah.
No problem.
Yep, okay. Mr. Mitry,
Apologies for being late, sir.
I'll take it up with the Minister.
His phone switched off.
Please do.
Oh yes, mobile phones to silent, please, gentlemen. Okay, page 41 of your pack, we have a response from the Department to our request for further information following the briefing from Ministers on the 25th of June. We're being advised that a second high-level scoping exercise is being carried out with regard to victims outside the remit of the Historical Institutional Abuse Inquiry. And you will recall, members, we have yet to receive a response to a separate letter when we asked the Department's views on the proposed extension to the HIA inquiry. The Department has also provided a response in relation to queries regarding foreign direct investment and the Community Relations in Schools-led body programme, and we've discussed that. But on the scoping exercise from the Historical Institution Abuse Inquiry, members, I was surprised to read there's a second high-level scoping exercise carried out? Because previously we were told there was a scoping exercise being carried out by a high-level official. And I am not aware of the outcome of the first scoping exercise, which would make it very difficult to scrutinise a second scoping exercise. Any thoughts? First has obviously given rise to the need for a second.
Well, you know, we'd be receiving representations, obviously, from people who are out with current inquiry. So I think that letter to OFMdFM was February, was it? It was February by my recall. So here we are 6-7 months later. That is not replied to, and there's uncertainty about why there's a need for a second scoping exercise. There's only just confirmed doubts and anxieties that people are out with the inquiry. So we need to find out what was the outcome of the first. Are they going to tell people, besides ourselves, what was the outcome of the first, and what is the character of the second? It may well be that there's good grounds that the first, you know, wasn't adequate, or it raised more questions than it answered, or whatever. But so I think they need to create some certainty. They can't leave this drift.
Well, can I propose that we write to the department asking for sight of the results of the first scoping exercise, or a summary of the key findings, and what are the terms of reference for this second scope?
Agreed. And the time frame for its conclusion, and a time frame for decision, far side of conclusion.
Very ambitious.
Infinity,
Ask anyway.
beyond.
It's a Seamus Heaney-like optimism about you today. Okay, members, page 45 of your pack. We have a response from the Department to the Committee's request for an update in relation to the allocation of funds from the Central Good Relations Funding Programme for 2014-15. The Department provides details of 12 applicants that have been advised that they will receive Central Good Relations funding. We're further advised the next tranche of funding is being considered for release, and further funding will be released when and if it becomes available. Content to note? Page
Chair, would it be possible to get information as to how much has been awarded to in total to those projects vis-a-vis the budget available for Central Good Relations Fund? And the report also mentions OFMdFM providing significant funding through the Community Relations Council and District Councils to deliver good relations projects. Would it be possible to get some general information about what projects that funding has contributed towards?
Would that be something that we could ask Assembly Research to look at?
By all means, yeah. I think it would be interesting to get a bit more detail than tends to be given.
Okay. Any objections?
There is a letter there, Chair, on the 3rd of July asking for some of that information.
I just think I'm sort of proposing a slightly different approach than
Yeah.
endless letters backwards and forwards, committee to department.
Yeah.
You see if Assembly Research could undertake that. Okay, thank you very much. Page 48, we have a response from the department to our request for further info on the Civil Contingencies Group NI workstream aimed at enhancing local level civil contingencies. Content to note? Yeah. Page 51, the department responds to our request for information on the public meetings with regard to the consultation on the racial equality strategy, and acknowledging the First Minister's apology for not adhering to the usual protocols for the publication of consultation documents. Content to note?
Chair, just on that, would we be able to find out the times of those events?
As in time of day?
Yes. It just gives the date and location, but a time would be useful to look and
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Page 55, a response from the department to our request for responses to issues raised by members at the provisional outturn briefing for financial year 13-14. We're being advised the financial transaction capital loan to the University of Ulster through the SIB, Strategic Investment Board, will not have an impact on the certification of the department's accounts for financial year 13-14. Content to note? On a related matter, members, can I suggest we write to the department to request a written briefing on the outcome of June monitoring and implications for the department and its arm's length bodies?
Great.
Okay. Outstanding correspondence, that's page 7 of your tabled papers. Pause for any comment. Otherwise, can I refer you to the correspondence summary sheet at page 61 of your packs? This will detail correspondence received over the summer with suggested actions where that is appropriate, and it's a little sort of development on how we do business. I'm going to ask the clerk to highlight items that require decision by committee, and of course, members, you are more than at liberty to highlight anything else you feel you wish to raise.
Thanks, Chair. The first piece of correspondence that requires a committee decision is at page 82, and it's a letter from the House of Lords regarding regulations for promoting the free movement of citizens and businesses. And it's simply just, they've asked for details of how the committee has reached its conclusion with regard to the resource implications. So it's just to forward it on to DFP for comment, because some of the information came from DFP, which helped shape the committee's letter to the House of Lords. If members are content. The next item I would refer you on to is on page 95. And that's a request from the department to have sight of the draft report, inquiry report, which is expected obviously in spring next year, and it's just right back to the, or I beg your pardon, actually, that's page 113 for the draft inquiry report. And it's just right back to the department to say that the committee will welcome any input to its inquiry, and that the department will have 8 weeks to formally respond once the report has been finalised. Members are content with that? And sorry then to take you back to page 95, where the Committee for Education have provided the terms of references for its inquiry into shared or integrated education. It's just to respond to the Committee for Education to say that any issues that come up regarding shared or integrated education arising from the committee's inquiry will be referred on to the Committee for Education.
Yep.
That's okay.
Good.
And at page 114 of the pack, there was a late submission from Jane Morris to the committee's Barroso Task Force inquiry. And it's just to note that, and also add it to the website with the other inquiry papers.
Great.
And all the rest of the items of correspondence are for noting, unless members themselves have any issues to raise with respect to any particular.
No. Thank you very much. Members, with your permission, I'm going to adjust the agenda here, and before we take our oral briefing, go to item 7, which is the legislative consent memorandum in relation to the childcare payments bill. I'm doing this in light of our informal discussion. We did receive a briefing from Employers for Childcare and a briefing from departmental officials at the beginning of July. Page 177 of your pack is the beginning of a response from the department to the issues raised by Employers for Childcare. In its response, the department advises the Assembly has no authority over the phasing out of the current employer-supported childcare voucher scheme, nor does it have any authority over the national insurance contribution disregard for employer-supported childcare. And as the new scheme is a tax-based system, it is not a devolved matter. We're also being advised the new scheme will be opened up to those who are not able to receive support through the employer-supported childcare, people self-employed. We are being told by the department those families that will be better off in the current scheme can remain there for as long as they have eligible children, again providing their employer continues to offer the scheme and they remain with the same employer. With regard to universal credit, which was an issue that was raised in July, the department advises the bill caters for the possibility that universal credit may be implemented here in the future, but it does not assume that it will be in operation. The department also advises that parents who are agency workers, shift workers or on zero contracts zero-hour contracts, will be eligible for the new tax-free childcare scheme in the same way as anybody else, provided they meet the eligibility criteria, including rules around qualifying employment. OFMdFM have given a submission to the initial Treasury consultation on these proposals. A list of those consulted by the department and any responses are provided at page 15 of your tabled pack. And finally, at page 33 and tabled is a further submission from Employers for Childcare, where they reiterate their concerns regarding the proposals and request the committee considers postponing its consideration of the LCM at today's meeting. What I would add to that, members, is we have a statutory duty to respond within 15 days. If we do not do that, it is my understanding that 5 working days after that, the department can go ahead, irrespective of us taking a view. We're actually at day 18, so in working days, at the beginning of next week, the department could, if they wished, press ahead, but we understand informally that there are no such plans at this stage. Mr. Spratt.
Mr. Chair, well, I mean, on the basis of our discussion earlier, and given that it's not on the papers for next Monday or Tuesday, if we can get officials, given that officials weren't able to come today, if maybe committee staff could speak to them, I would propose that we put it off until next Wednesday, but deal with it. It has to be dealt with next Wednesday, given the timescales that you've indicated, Chair. So I propose that we put it off until next week, but on the provision that no matter what the questions are that members might have, it has to be dealt with, because obviously the legislation doesn't allow us to wait any longer.
And can I just put it on the record, the fact that officials are not here today is not an indication of reluctance, it was simply a diary issue. Yeah. So we will try and get them diaried in for next Wednesday. I think we're all agreed.
Okay. I think the off for a week is the right thing, of course. Just one note of caution about the proviso that Jimmy has referred to. We are being told that we have no time left to consent or not to the LCM, but I'd like to see that confirmed, because the bill is at a quite early stage in its processes over in Westminster. So I'd like that confirmed that there is no further time to consent or not to an LCM.
I mean, I'm quite happy, but I know that Mr. Atwood likes to put a provision on everything. It's on the basis of the information, Chair, you gave us, which is, I assume, actually correct.
As best as we can.
What we're told, the way that we need to deal with something. And it's something that we need to deal with, and the department can go ahead without us. So on that basis, I would have thought Mr. Atwood has another week to get any questions together he needs to get together.
Well, Chair, and this shouldn't be a matter of contention. Jimmy seems to want to make it. There may be an official's timeline as opposed to a legislative timeline.
Well, we've gathered, I think, a reasonable amount of conversation and information through conversation. So let's do that over the course of the next week, and we'll take on board what you're saying, Alex. Absolutely. And we are going to address it again next week, and we'll bring whatever formal and informal information we can gather to the table at that point. Thank you very much. Okay, well, we revert then to item 6 on your agenda, which is a briefing by the department on the analysis of responses to their consultation on delivering social change for children and young people. We recall officials previously briefed us on the themes emerging from the consultation process in May. At page 197 of your electronic pack, you'll find the clerk's brief, and the analysis of the consultation responses is available from page 200. The department has subsequently sent a revised document, and the relevant pages for that are included in table packs, page 41. The corresponding papers which have changed in your main pack are pages 203, 208, 209, 268 and 283. Could I ask the clerk, was that pointed out to you, or did your staff have to go and find that out?
No, it was pointed out.
Right, that's good. Okay. Also included at page 310, for your information, is the official report of the evidence session in May and correspondence from the Commissioner for Children and Young People with regard to the consultation. You'll find that at page 321. Following the previous evidence session, we wrote to the Department regarding a number of statutory obligations under the Child Poverty Act and engaging with the Commissioner for Children and Young People. We got a response from the Department to these matters and some other queries. That's at page 337. So we welcome officials to the committee, Margaret Rose McNaughton, Janet Smith and Dave Rogers. Margaret Rose, can I offer you up to 5 minutes for opening remarks?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to update you on the consultation. As the Chair has said, we were here in January to discuss the approach on DSC for children and young people, and we provided the committee with an interim update again on the 20th of March and come back in May to brief you on the initial findings of the consultation. You've got the analysis report, which provides a summary of the key views and themes emerging. And really, we're here today to give you a brief overview of that report and the proposed next steps. It's probably important at the outset that I say that the gathering of views and opinions on the consultation document took a mixed methods approach. So data collection was both quantitative and qualitative, and it combined public meetings in which people could air their views. So due to the variety of methods by which people could respond, and to make sure that all responses were given due attention, the analysis document provides an individual section on each method of data collection, whether it was by public meeting or online survey, focus groups, structured interviews with stakeholders or written submissions. So the analysis document brings together all of these views, but hasn't attempted to combine these views, but instead has taken an overarching assessment based on the complex variety of methods by which responses were gathered. And just generally, while respondents welcomed the document and the outcomes-based approach, there were a number of concerns, I think, of which everyone was aware, particularly around the integration of the child poverty strategy with the children's strategy. I think the committee also had those concerns. So in general, our key stakeholders felt more time and engagement with stakeholders was needed to develop an integrated strategy, and that the current document risked diluting the outcomes in the current 10-year strategy for children and young people. So as a result of those concerns, it has been decided to lay a separate child poverty strategy for 2014-17 as required by the Child Poverty Act in the Assembly, and to engage further with stakeholders and departments in the development of a new strategy to replace the 10-year strategy for children and young people. And that was, I think, really relayed to yourselves in the letter of the 11th of July, in which we included the analysis document. So the concerns expressed by stakeholders in relation to the child poverty element of DSC for children and young people have been taken on board in the development of the new child poverty strategy. And we're coming back to you on the 1st of October to discuss the draft child poverty strategy, and committee members will receive a copy of the draft strategy in advance of that meeting. So in terms of the way forward on DSC for children and young people, as I've said, the separate child poverty strategy will be laid in the Assembly, and we now propose a co-design process will be used to involve stakeholders directly in the development of a new strategy for children and young people. And co-design has been used previously in work around Together Building a United Community, and is currently being used to develop the full childcare strategy. The process has been working well and has been well received by stakeholders. The co-design will involve children, young people, parents and representatives from community and voluntary organisations and stakeholders, and of course the committee. And we'll begin the process of co-design for the new strategy this month, if possible. So thank you for your time. I'd be very happy to take any questions you have in relation to the analysis document or on our proposals for the way forward.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So if I could summarise what I think I'm hearing, you've had a very good consultation, you've listened and you have reacted in significant measures, not least in separating out two proposed strategies.
That was absolutely right, yes.
Okay. When you were here, Margaret Rose, on the 14th of May, you said it wasn't possible at that stage to give us an analysis of the consultation responses because it was a work in progress. But the document you provided us with today is dated May 2014.
Well, I think that's probably just another editing error. We have been working on it continuously since, over the summer, indeed, right up until July, until you got the version on the 11th of July. So it may still in draft form, but it will, when it is published, and will be published on the website. Of course, it needs to be dated then, at the correct date at that point.
In terms of the statutory obligations which the department faces with regard to the Child Poverty Act, it seemed to me, reading your response, that in granting an extension to the consultation period, which was something that we were very keen happened, you're actually seem to be suggesting that the statutory deadline for laying the annual report was missed because of us.
Oh, absolutely not. No, I think the general view was that we had attempted to meet the statutory deadline where we could. Clearly, stakeholders were very concerned at the 5-week consultation period, and yourselves as well. Really, with hindsight now, it wasn't the right way to do things. We did seek legal advice then on how that would affect our duty to lay the strategy. And the outcome of that was that it was in the best interest of the public that we take more time over the strategy, and that would be much better. I would serve the public much better doing that than laying a strategy in a rush at the end of March. But no, under no circumstances are we blaming the committee for that.
Well, then, could I ask you just to review that section of the correspondence? Because certainly on first reading I formed an absolute opinion that it seemed to suggest that the committee was responsible for missing the deadline, and certainly we felt it was very important to get as close to a full consultation process as possible, but I don't think we wish to take responsibility for missing that deadline. When do you intend to lay the 3rd annual report?
The 3rd annual report will be laid at the same time as the new child poverty strategy.
Which is?
Well, that will be, at the moment we have the draft child poverty strategy is with departments to finalise their targets and their indicators. We will then come back to committee on the 1st of October. So, and following that meeting with the committee and whatever amendments need to be made, we then need to go to the executive. So it is likely to be probably towards the end of October into November.
Okay. Back to the 14th of May. You advised the appointment of a local and Northern Ireland representative to the Child Poverty Commission, which is an obligation under that Child Poverty Act. You said then it was currently under consideration by the department. Where are we with it now, please?
Still under consideration by the department.
It is a statutory obligation which remains unfulfilled.
Yes, it remains under consideration in the department.
Could you give us any clue as to why it's under consideration rather than actioned?
Well, I can't go into it in any further detail at this stage because I really don't. I can only say that it's still under consideration.
And can I ask what is under consideration? Is it, for example, a list of potential delegates?
Well, that would be one of the issues. Potentially, well, should there be a representative on the new commission, and who that representative might be?
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying one of the issues under consideration is whether there should be a representative from Northern Ireland?
That's my understanding. Janet, is that your understanding?
Yeah, the Assembly must give its consent for the North to be represented on the Social Mobility and Child Poverty Commission, and as Margaret Rose has stated, that the matter is currently under consideration. The original Child Poverty Act of 2010 created a Child Poverty Commission, but the Commission was never established at that time. The Welfare Reform Act then of 2012 came in, or 2012 amended the Child Poverty Act to create the Social Mobility and Child Poverty Commission, and we've stated in the correspondence. But amendments to this legislation also mean we're no longer obligated to consult the Commission in development of our child poverty work and the strategy. So we continue to report against the targets that are listed against the Child Poverty Act of 2010 and are consulted in the development of the UK Child Poverty Strategy. In May, the committee highlighted the consultation response from the Commissioner for Children and Young People, which stated that we had a statutory obligation to consult, as you've mentioned, the Social Mobility and Child Poverty Commission in the development of the new strategy. This is inaccurate, and the Welfare Reform Act, as I've stated, of 2012 amended the Child Poverty Act and removed this obligation. Prior to 2012, a commission had not been created, so therefore we're not required to consult the Commission in the development of a draft strategy. So we're currently, We have been asked by stakeholders and from yourselves committee in relation to how we're progressing and are we going to be represented on the Social Mobility Commission, and as Margaret Rose has stated, it is currently under consideration.
Okay, so to be clear, it is no longer a statutory obligation to appoint a representative to this commission.
The Welfare Reform Act of 2012 amended the Child Poverty Act of 2010 to create the Social Mobility Commission, which replaced the original commission, which was in the Child Poverty Act.
So when did you find out that you no longer had that statutory obligation?
We sought on correspondence from yourselves, advice from our Department Solicitor's Office, and we have responded in relation to their advice.
Okay, so sometime after the May session. Okay, thank you. Turning to the summary and analysis of responses, you provided us with a document that's over 100 pages long, yet section 12 on the department's response is only 2 pages long. Is that appropriate? Is that proportionate?
It seems possibly maybe not proportionate, but the reality is that we took on board the views that the document, as you go through it, you see that people were very concerned at almost each section. The decision was taken that we're going to separate these 2 documents. We will have a child poverty one, so we have worked then on a new draft a new child poverty strategy. So that draft child poverty strategy is fairly substantial. I have a draft of it here, but that will really be part of the response then, the department's response to the analysis. So while that looks, quite light, the new child poverty strategy, and then of course all the work on the development of the new 10-year strategy will add to that.
And you also make clear that you're going to give additional and separate thought to children and young people in rural areas and with disabilities.
Absolutely.
Does that become a 3rd document? Does it become a 3rd consultation? How does that work?
No, I think that will be do you mean in terms of the new 10-year strategy? That will be part of our co-design process. We will need to include children with disabilities, children from rural areas, and indeed, I think we have already had informal conversations with, in particular, the Children and Young People's Partnership, and I'm meeting tomorrow with the Children's Commissioner, and it's about how we can actually access children in rural areas and those with disabilities and other children who perhaps is harder to hear, but they will all be part of the co-design process.
Thank you. Alex Maskey.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just go back to the last bit there, Margaret Rose, in terms of the Welfare Reform Act that you referred to, which was passed in Westminster? Am I right in saying, picking you up right, that you're saying that Act took away our obligation to consult with the very people that is the forum in the Commission? So the Welfare Reform Act passed in London takes away our obligation to consult with the very people that it would be crucial, in my opinion, for us to consult with, for us to meet our obligations on child poverty.
It takes away the obligation for both Northern Ireland and Scotland.
Yeah, but I'm only worried about here.
Yeah, but I actually have a copy of the amendment with me. Have you've got it handy there, have you? Here it is here. The original actual wording in the for the Child Poverty Commission was that sorry, let me get here to it. The UK strategies, I'm trying to bring
Section 8.
It's in Section 8. Yes, Section 8 was amended by Schedule 13. So basically what they've said is the new body to be called the Social Mobility and Child Poverty Commission, new functions for the Commission under the Welfare Reform Act, and then the reference in the previous Section 8 of the Act were removed. Have you got the actual... It might be best actually if I copy this to the committee along with a letter setting out exactly where the amendments were made, because it is quite legalistic and would need to be set out properly, I think, for you. But it's clear that...
But I think Alex's point is, before welfare reform, there was a statutory obligation for us to send a representative to consult with this body and subsequently that is now an option, not an obligation. And obviously Mr Maskey's not happy.
It's silent. It's not an option, it's silent.
Well, that appears to be the case here. I think the Child Poverty Act was brought in under the previous Labour government, and then with the coalition government and some of the changes that have been made.
Appreciate that. I mean, I know it's quite technical, but I think it's quite important that we understand that there are wider implications of these things, because ultimately we then have to decide how do we do our job if we keep getting the tools that we require or the obligations imposed on us to do our job effectively. But I appreciate if you could provide that, Margaret.
I will come back to you with a more formal response to that.
Can I bring up the question of the Commissioner for Children and Young People? I think in May, I don't want to rehearse this, but obviously there wasn't a perfect relationship between the department and the Commissioner, certainly in the Commissioner's view of things. I think one of the focuses the Commissioner has now is the extent to which this is all based in the United Nations guidelines. How do you feel you are with that?
In terms of the new developing the new strategy, or in terms of developing the child poverty strategy?
Child poverty in the first instance.
Child poverty. Well, the new child poverty strategy will take on board fully the views that the Commissioner made in relation to the UN principles, and I mean, it's difficult to get into the strategy if you haven't seen a copy of it yet, and we will go into it in more detail on the 1st of October. But certainly we will have a full section on UNCRC principles within that, and they are in the draft version at the moment.
Right. And the broader strategy again?
And in the broader strategy as well, I mean, that will be part of the co-design process. We will be going out, when we go out for the initial, the pre-consultation with all of the stakeholders. I mean, everything really is up for discussion at that point. And that clearly was one of the issues that was coming through from most of the responses to the consultation, that we need to set it clearly within the UNCRC principles. So yes, I suspect that it will be.
Would it be right to say that you would view the UNCRC as sort of the foundation rock for all your work in this area?
Clearly, yeah. Well, clearly that is the view that's coming from the stakeholders. That is the way they see it, and you know, as you have agreed, you know, we have taken on board what they have said. We have included it, and we will be included in the child poverty strategy, and certainly I imagine that it will be a very fundamental part of the new 10-year strategy.
Is there a counter-argument to UNCRC being the foundation?
No, not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
No.
In the consultations, I think you indicated majority support the use of an outcomes-based approach.
Yeah.
Okay. But then later on, with regard to the Turning the Curve workshops, I think one of the conclusions from those workshops was that it highlighted a lack of real understanding of that approach, and in particular the role of outcomes and indicators. Is that not a contradiction?
I think there was a bit of confusion with some people. Janet, do you want to say something about the
Yes, I mean, the majority of consultees supported the use of the outcomes-based approach. That was based on our survey questionnaires and also the written responses that came in. Whenever we talk about the Turning the Curve exercise, that was a method that we used to bring departments on board to talk to them purely about the methodology. So whilst we talk about the outcomes-based approach being welcomed through the public and the sector and the children and young people, they also had sight of the various indicators that were associated with that and the proposed actions, whereas the event that we had with the Turning the Curve was really training and talking to departments around how that outcomes-based approach and methodology should work. And there was some slight confusion with departments around a real understanding of how that would work, how targets would be developed, how they would report in relation to delivery of targets and actions. So that's probably where the confusion maybe appears in the document.
Have you got a clear sense of how you're going to do this, and additionally how you're going to monitor?
We do have a proposed monitoring framework, Chair, and we'll talk to you about that in more detail whenever we come back on the 1st of October. We have talked to departments more about the whole outcomes-based accountability and the whole outcomes-based approach. They have seen a copy of the draft strategy along with the analysis. They have made comments in relation to that, and the majority, high percentage of the departments are all very keen and more content now, you know, in relation to the proposals that have been presented to them. But it's not so much us presenting proposals, it's more around working with departments in detail and having discussions and having further progress in relation to, you know, how we're going to achieve these actions, how we're going to achieve the EU targets, which they will be signing up to. So it's a joined up approach across departments and across the sector and children and young people.
Okay, thank you. Alex Edward.
Well, first of all, I certainly welcome what seems to be a quite significant, if not dramatic, change of course based upon the consultation, because it seems to me that there was a very strong indictment from the sector in relation to what it was being proposed, and the department has been right to reconfigure to deal with child poverty, not least because your own commissioned research, the Institute of Fiscal Studies research, that confirms what the figures are going to be in terms of absolute and relative levels by 2020, which are going to be 3 times greater than what the ambition was in terms of child poverty levels by 2020. So in as much as, in my view, the department was going down a wrong path, I welcome that you've rectified and are going down the right path by laying now a child poverty strategy as opposed to this wider approach. But it all comes down to what's in that strategy, and we are obviously for now in the dark because you're coming back in October and we'll be able to draw conclusions then. But just so that I understand the process, you will lay, after you've done your consultation and discussed it with committee, you'll lay the child poverty strategy as a work in progress up to the end of 2016 with the intention of publishing a different version of that in 2017 as is required under law?
Well, I mean, I think the new strategy that we will lay in October will be for 14 to 17 because that's a 3-year strategy. And then the Child Poverty Act requires us then to do another strategy. Now, whether people want to, as we go forward through DSC for children and young people, whether people want at that stage then to consider putting the child poverty back into the new strategy again from 2017, I mean, that will be, you know, for our stakeholders and as we go through the co-design process. But, you know, every 3 years we are required to have a new strategy. What format that strategy takes, you know, I suppose is up to ourselves and stakeholders and committee members to decide.
Yeah, certainly I'd like to think that based upon the experience of this consultation that it will stick very tightly to a child poverty strategy given the scale of child poverty that we're now facing in the run down to 2020 and thereafter. I don't think that if you fragment your approach you're going to have any of the possible outcomes in terms of reducing child poverty. Well, where are we now in terms of delivering social change for children and young people consultation? Is that abandoned?
Oh, no. I mean, the analysis document covers both child poverty and the DSC for children and young people consultation. And because the stakeholders were really concerned about the lack of engagement in developing the document and the dilution of the outcomes in the 10-year strategy, that was why we decided then we would separate the two again. The new strategy will be developed from now as a part of a co-design process. Right. There will be another consultation on that. Because it will be
on the wider children and young people.
On the wider children and young people strategy, yes, because that will really be the new strategy taking over the 10-year strategy from 2016, which is when the current strategy finishes anyhow. So we need to be prepared from 2016 to have a new whether it's 10-year strategy or 5-year strategy. I mean, that will be up for discussion.
For children and young persons.
For children and young people, yeah.
So that part of the consultation. DSC for children and young people dealt with issues beyond child poverty. What's happening with the issues beyond child poverty?
Well, those issues.
Aye.
Well, those issues now will be those that are not included in the 10-year strategy currently.
Yes.
And those issues, we can't do much with those until we go through the design process for the new strategy, but they will be hopefully incorporated into the new strategy.
In 2017?
In 2016, yes, end of 2016.
Well, it's going to be done through 2016, but the strategy will be laid in 2017. Is that not right?
Well, the new children's strategy, yes, because the current one
is
is
a
up to
situation
2016.
that, see, if they welcome attention on child poverty, we're not going to have a children's strategy until 2017.
We continue with the current strategy.
Well, yeah.
We've got the current strategy right up to 2016, and we need to be in a position to have a new children's strategy then from when the current one expires.
And the final question is, in respect of the child poverty strategy that's going to come back in October, is there going to be, what's the process for consulting with the sector about the content of that, as opposed to the response to the DSC, Children, Young People's consultation?
Okay.
The DSC for Children and Young People's consultation document, as you're aware, is a document which brought on board those three policy areas: child poverty work and everything that we're doing on that, and how we would like to move forward, delivering social change, or the 10-year strategy for children and young people, and our UNCRC work. So that consultation process was for those three policy areas. And what we have done is we have taken the responses based on what came from the consultation and used those responses to inform a new child poverty strategy in draft form. And that has gone out to departments for discussion and clearance to the ministers in relation to actions and targets and proposed indicators. But we very much used the responses from the consultation on that overarching framework which brought on board the child poverty work to help us inform the new strategy. Now, as we move forward with that draft strategy, and once it's laid in the Assembly, we will be working closely with our stakeholders on how we actually deliver on that. And we're proposing that we set up various outcomes focused groups to take forward each of the outcomes, and those focus groups will be made up of representatives from key departments, representatives from the voluntary sector, representatives from the children's sector, and we're really also trying to get representatives of children and young people themselves, working within those outcomes groups to help us deliver on the various actions that will make a difference.
And again, that seems to me to be broadly the right approach. Like, this is a question that I don't think really you can answer, maybe even should be asked until we come back in October. But is the touchstone against which the child poverty strategy and draft is being judged is the IFS review of what child poverty is going to look like in 2020? Is that the touchstone against which we're judging all of this?
I think it's important to recall what the IFS work is. The IFS work is an assessment, an independent assessment by the Institute of Fiscal Studies into what child poverty levels will look like, or the best estimate of what they'll look like in 2020, factoring in what we know has happened, in other words, the economy and some legislative changes, what might happen, and of course there are a lot of uncertainties there, especially in the legislative field, and then produce, but not considering what then might happen as a direct result of any additional strategies on top of that. So it's an estimate which shows you the best estimate what might be, not what will happen. And one thing we have asked the Institute of Fiscal Studies to do, as you may recall, is they produced an original document, they revised it last year. We've asked them for a further revision, which we're expecting shortly, and we're intending to publish in the autumn. As you may know, child poverty figures have actually, in the last child poverty figures for Northern Ireland, declined slightly, whereas the projection was they may increase. So I suspect you will get some sort of revision of those figures. I can't speculate on what's going to be in the new one, but as you point out, the last one clearly showed a projected increase. And I suppose that lays out whether the increase is as much, the same as, or greater in the next one. I'd be very surprised if it's revised to show no increase, but that's a speculation on my part. I think that kind of will show the kind of the challenge that's before all of us.
Well, whatever the figures eventually end up, because it is somewhat informed guesswork and objective circumstances change.
Yeah.
The conclusion nonetheless has to be whether absolute and relative poverty is 30.8 and 34.7, or whether it's 29 and 34. The figures are so catastrophic, whatever way you project forward, that what's coming forward on the 1st of October must be as radical as necessary to respond to that catastrophic outcome.
No, take that on board, absolutely. But, you know, what we'll be bringing forward, I suppose, are the things that we hope that we can actually do and that we can influence here, you know, in terms of reducing poverty. When you look at what they're doing in, you know, maybe Scotland or in England, and their proposals are putting forward there, a lot of it is around, certainly in England, is around, you know, increasing the wages and making sure that households, you know, have more income, and that reducing the number of workless families. Where we can, we will hope to replicate some of those, but there are some of the things that will be beyond our control in terms of tax, you know, any tax relief.
I'm going to request in advance of the 1st of October, it might be useful to get some briefing about what the strategies are in England and Scotland, and what the projected 2020 figures are in terms of absolute and relative poverty figures for children, just so that we've got a touchstone in terms of other jurisdictions' response against which to judge what we present on the 1st of October.
And yes, that's another one for research, unless anybody objects. Okay, Deputy Chair, Chris Little.
Thanks, Chair. You've touched on it to a certain extent already, but there was some criticism and consultation response about the narrow focus of the delivering social change framework around child poverty. Are you confident that the new approach will allow you to coordinate government departments to achieve better outcomes for children and young people across the board? And can you tell us a bit more about some of the key areas in which that's going to cover?
Well, I think, yes, I think we would be confident that, you know, what we want to do this time, and we will be working very closely with particularly the Children and Young People's Partnership and with the Children's Commissioner and other, there's a couple of other organisations who are not represented on the Children and Young People's Partnership. But part of the co-design process will be to bring departments along with us from the beginning. We have currently a document that is, you know, our current strategy has over 300 actions, I think. But in working on our new strategy and in developing our new strategy, departments have to be involved from the outset, and they have to sign up to the actions that they're going to take. And I think that is the beauty of the co-design process, that because they are involved from the beginning, you know, that we can be confident then that they will take on board the issues that they need to be taking on board and actually doing the things that are for their departments to do.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Okay, if members are content. Dave and Janet and Margaret Rose, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
See you in October. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the sector was swaying. No, it was the ESS.
It's even harder and harder. They're actually
one reason why I said second everybody in.
Okay, members, so unless there's any other comment on that session, I think the main action point is that we're going to commission research from Assembly research in terms of what's happening in neighbouring jurisdictions. And we move on to item 8, which is the Victims and Survivors Service. This is a written briefing. May I say we did try to get an oral briefing, but for a number, I suppose, of legitimate reasons, for want of a better phrase, that wasn't possible, but we will ask the principal individuals in the VSS to come to committee as soon as is practicable. So they have given us an update on progress against the implementation of the 2 review recommendations, and also a short synopsis of their current financial situation. Now, the chair of the service resigned in June, followed not long afterwards by the chief executive, and of course we also lost the commissioner from the Victims Commission. You'll have heard Deputy First Minister advising the House in question time this week that a bid for additional resources was not met in June monitoring. So from page 349 in your packs, you've got VSS papers. Could I highlight first of all, organisations funded by the Victims and Survivors Programme have been tasked with efficiency savings of 4.42%. And the early indications suggest this will have a direct impact on frontline delivery by victims groups. Secondly, there's an insufficient budget to carry out in-depth focus groups and client satisfaction surveys until October. Thirdly, the VSS and Victims Unit within the department have bid for additional resources in October monitoring to the value of 3.3 million to ensure that support for the bereaved is available through respite breaks and education and training. I think those respite breaks and education and training are the 2 programmes most favoured by the bereaved. They're also bidding to provide critical support to implement the CVS recommendations, to enable letters of offer currently on hold to be issued under the support programme. And finally, within VSS, immediate efficiency savings have been undertaken, including the cessation of temporary and contract staff and the deferment of staff training and future contracts. I understand 7 temporary staff have been let go. So I understand the financial situation to be that this time last year, following June monetary 2013, VSS had a budget in excess of 12 million. Beginning of the year it was 11.3. It's currently 10. They have commitments of 10.8. They have a basket of applications for funding which have been deemed legitimate, have ticked all the boxes to the value of about 350,000 in addition to that 10.8 of commitments. And you have these 2 schemes that they cannot afford to run. So not a great position.
There's still quite a pocket of money in relation to victims' issues. And one of the things that, and I mean, I've raised it before, concerns me is that the jam, if you like, on the bread is getting thinner and thinner because it's been spread further. And sometimes that's happening in cases of where there's a fallout in an organisation and then a new one starts up and they make application to the victims group. I think it would be worthwhile, and we've heard the stories from various groups on this committee where there's, for instance, I think Oma is one of the places that was mentioned, where there's 5 or 6 offices within a few hundred yards of each other in the one street. You know, and that obviously has the knock-on effect of 6 sets of rent or 5 sets of rent, whatever it is, and all of those other issues. So, would it be possible for us to get, or could we ask the department, I assume if you look down in the province from a helicopter, that they'll be able to tell us where all of the groups are, what funding those groups are getting individually, and the individual offices are getting from right across the border, irrespective of from what side of the community they come, so that some sort of an assessment can be made to see and when those groups started. In other words, you know, they should be able to indicate to us when groups have started up, if they've started up in the last 6 months, 12 months, whatever. because, and I know we all get queries in relation to these issues, but it's very, very difficult to know. There's still the same pot of money, but it's getting spread out farther and farther. I think that's part of the problem. Let's face it, there's probably not going to be a big lot of additional money in coming weeks or months or whatever. So I think there's maybe an efficiency thing that needs to be looked at to see how better organisations that may have similar views could actually work together in one building, because that has been done in the case of our other arm's length bodies in terms of efficiency savings, to try and make the money spread farther and get to the victims where it should be getting, and not to offices and opening offices and stuff like that, and making sure that the staff is there to service.
Could I make 2 points before open it up? I mean, I think it's important to say that, I mean, the bid for October monitoring is 3.3 million, which is effectively, that's 33% of the current budget. So it's, you know, in percentage terms, it's a huge hike. But I understand informally that OFMdFM and the Finance Minister are very, very keen. Maybe not, I can't say they can meet 3.3, but they're very, very keen that there will be at least a partially positive response in October monitoring to the request for more money, so it's not an entirely bleak picture. The second thing, Jimmy, and you make a very good point, and I don't want to talk about OMA or anywhere specifically.
No, well, I'll just use that as an
example. Oh, absolutely, in the street. There are six now in the same street in OMA. It will lead us at some point to having to make a decision in terms of this. You start maybe with one group, and then it becomes two groups because, for example, the group who break away say, well, look, all you're focused on is truth and justice. We are more interested in education for our children. So the point, if we go down that route, that we're eventually going to come to is, do we say to those groups, I'm sorry, you have fallen out for legitimate reasons, but you are going to have to share an office and electricity and computers, and I'm not asking anybody to give an opinion on that today, but
I'm not necessarily asking to chair, but you know, some of the efficiency savings and some of the some of the arm's length bodies was done through the building, you know, the overheads of the building and stuff like that, where they were meeting in the same place, but not necessarily using the same equipment and all the rest of it. I'm not extremely, but I mean, I think we're entitled, and I mean, if the committee doesn't want to do it, I'm just proposing on the basis of, I think every member around the table, it might be helpful for us to be able to see that sort of information. I mean, I'm quite happy to do it by means of a question to the department, which any of us are entitled to do. But I think, you know, it would be a worthwhile exercise so that we can have an overview on exactly, because I'm not sure that anybody around the table knows exactly how many groups there are and all the rest of it. And suppose there's another added on bit to it. Some of the money is not necessarily out of the 10 odd million. Some of it's coming from SEUPP as well, which is an arm's length body of OFMdFM as well, in terms of some oversight. So I assume that we could get that information as well. Yeah, because I suspect there's quite
research
a bit of area.
On foot of last week's informal meeting, research have undertaken to look at those issues. I'm just, you know, sort of thinking it through.
I'm asking for the department. You know, surely the department can give us that through the victim, the VSS, and what have you.
But if you go back through Community Relations Council, you'll find out how many groups were funded and to what extent. I mean, the number was roughly 100.
Yeah, but I thought if we could get it in front of us on a piece of paper,
absolutely,
so that there's a helicopter view of the thing.
Yeah, but I think there's work.
Basically asking for it, Chair.
Yeah, there's work underway on that after last week.
It's one of something else, so it's kind of related because it's down to funding. We've all kind of dealt with this before, but I mean, it's just that this has been very pressing to particular families. So, but I think it's an example of how this all works or doesn't sometimes. I mean, if you're dealing with, and this is obviously relating to finite budgets and all the rest of that, but I mean, I'm dealing with a case, I know Chris had dealt with this, and I haven't got a chance to talk to him today, but he had already dealt with family some time ago. We have a case here where a lady whose father was killed 30 odd years ago, which was 15 years of age. And then years later, she had a brother shot dead and another one injured in the same incident. She's a victim in anybody's definition. Yet because her husband, who's on a minimum wage, gets 30 quid more than what the means test, whatever you call it, that is excluded from anything at all. So she's actually aggrieved that the system actually is in existence, because she feels that, you know, that here's her who is the victim, very much getting on with her life, very annoyed that, you know, even within a measly 30 quid, that she can't get a fiver or a box of chocolates. So I just think that, again, it's another example where it's grossly unfair to a lot of people the way these systems actually do ultimately work out. Because I know there has to be a finite budget for everything, but I mean, I don't know to what extent, if you open that up, what that might look like in terms of budgets. But this is a woman who would have a number of siblings, some of whose financial status would be different from others. Some would be eligible for something, some wouldn't be. And that puts a big strain on families, because in some cases there are people who may be eligible, some won't take it because another one can't, if you know what I mean. So I just think, I think I would like to hear how the service and so on would actually explain that to somebody.
Yeah, I think there are just so many issues in this. I remember advocating for a woman who was being threatened with court action and jail because she was claiming benefits, and on the form where it said, "Have you savings?" she had said no, and they came back to her and said, "You didn't declare the compensation. You were paid when your husband was shot dead." And she said, "But that's not savings." And clearly in her mind, savings is putting money away every Friday. And they were threatening her with court action. And even if in the black and white of the law is right, that woman was highly traumatised, as you would be when you get a phone call to say your husband's not coming home. So she didn't have the competence to understand the form she was filling out, and yet she was still going to be subjected to the full weight of some inspector saying, "You have lied, you will go to jail." So many issues.
Can we ask for a discussion around that, or some kind of a, I don't know, but I'd like the department or somebody to come here and just kind of go through it with us again.
Yeah, I'm not hearing any objections.
Okay, thank you.
Alex.
I agree with Alex's point, although I think the way it might be done in order to really understand the situation is to have some gathering of VSS and departmental people rather than having a committee session, just so that you can have, you can just really pursue the question line to get to the detail of it. Going back to Jimmy's point, my own view is that what we should be arguing for is what is evident that the baseline is wrong. So last year money moved across to VSS within year, and according to OFMdFM, more money will be moved over this year, and that confirms that the baseline is wrong. So I think what we should be arguing for is that the baseline is corrected, so that they're not relying upon monitoring. And that'll maybe begin to adjust the financial situation, but it is actually because of the obligation that we have to victims and survivors that it needs to be adjusted. And there may be, I don't know, but there may be multiple groups in some areas, but I don't think we should be pursuing that line at this time. I just think that would be misunderstood, it would be alienating, and that these relationships in some areas are so difficult, you'd know it better than anybody else, that I think that our obligation should be on the baseline rather than looking at the rationalising of service delivery. In relation to the letter that's come in from the VSS, some of the best work this committee last year was around the VSS. So I think we should get a quarterly update from the VSS and the department about the implementation of the recommendations. There are 41 recommendations that we're told have been fully implemented. We should be told what they are, because I can't remember. It's not referred to in the paper. It's not referred to in the papers. The papers only refer to the ones that are not implemented or partially implemented.
We are getting those papers, Alex.
All right.
Yeah.
And we need to get an update on the recommendations where we do have paper, but they say that it is awaiting responses from the VSS in September. So there's a number of recommendations where the VS, or not the VSS, the CVS is being consulted. So we need to know where that is, because it's meant to be updated as of this month.
Yeah. I mean, on the last point, Alex, all I would add in is we're looking at an organisation which has lost its chief executive and its chair, is down to 3 members of the board, where the recommendation was, given the importance and the workload, it should be 6 or 7. They're losing 7 temporary staff out of a total of staff of 30 something, I think. So they're under huge pressure. So I think, without giving up our right to scrutinise, I hope, we don't want to be putting an additional burden on limited resources just at this very difficult phase for them. So on that basis, they report to the department. They were reporting to us on a quarterly basis, but the criteria they were being asked to write 2 similar but different reports. And I think we should agree to receive the information they send to the department, so they only have to write the 1 report. It mightn't be exactly what we're looking for, but it'll be well within the ballpark. So I hope members are content.
Well, I mean, Chair, let's face it. I mean, I happen to agree with Alex. All of these recommendations were made as a result of pressure that the committee here put on, and I think we were right to monitor it. And it's through their own gross incompetence that they've been losing people, or people have left. I don't know for what reason, but you could only but guess, given some of the stuff that came out whenever we had them sitting down at the bottom of the table there.
I wouldn't be content to say that individuals had displayed gross incompetence.
Well, it's an organisation.
I think it's
There's
challenged.
some very basic things that were totally scandalous that was going on, not even answering telephone calls, emails and all the rest of it. And they were being criticised by the victims themselves. So, I mean, the recommendations were there, and I think it's right and proper that we continue to monitor them.
Yes, but one of the, I think it was, I can't remember, SIPFA said their first recommendation or criticism was that the department should have put in a board in a timely manner. So I think it goes from the micro to the macro. But anyway,
I mean, I think given all that, I mean, whatever people's characterisation of the problems, the fact of the matter is we still have a problem. So I do think, and I share your sentiment about letting them get on with their work, but at the same token, I think that the problems are still at a fairly basic level.
yes.
So I do think that we need to keep monitoring this.
Well, totally, Alice. It's just the way we do it. All I'm saying is, at the moment, if we don't show a little bit of flexibility, they're going to have to write 2 very similar reports. So basically do one thing twice. All I'm saying is, can we be content to take a look at what they're sending to the department? And if we feel that that isn't giving us the information we want, yes, of course, we can go back to them and say, this is what we need that's missing from this report. And I think we should have the acting chief executive and the acting chairman in as soon as they are available for an oral session to look at this. You're making a position that in terms of the baseline funding, I don't disagree. That's a very valid point. You're making some observations about what Jimmy is talking about. I concur that it could be very difficult, but I don't think it should stop us getting the database that Jimmy's asked for. Well, where we go with it is something else, but I don't think the potential difficulty should stop us collating the info.
I think that, I mean, obviously the key responsibility lies with the department. The operational end is the service. And yes, they have their job to do, so they've got to deliver, and they're set up to do that. But I'm not sure what it actually means that they have got to do to report. If they have to do something different for the department, that may well be okay, but it could be a paragraph for all I know, so it could be the same report but do both. But I'm just interested. I'm just keen that we keep our focus on accountability. I think it helps us, it helps the department, and it helps the service. And I think it's too early. Yeah, for me, and in my mind, it's too early to kind of relax the notion of accountability. So we need a department.
Nobody's proposing that we take the foot off the pedal. It's just that being sensitive.
Department at an very early stage to come and give us an update on where it's at, and then scheduling as soon as reasonable after that service.
Okay, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to say, I don't think that victims have been well served over this past number of years by the VSS. We have heard stories, all the time in relation to, as Jimmy says, even down to things answering the phone, how it's answered, if it's answered. And I think we do need to keep a very tight eye on it as it goes forward. And I have the sympathies with the newly appointed Chief Executive and the Chair. They're thrown in at the deep end here. And we need to give them time, but at the same time, I believe we have a role going forward to see if things improve.
Absolutely. Leslie.
Yes, no, then would support the idea of a single report. We can always follow that up here. And as Stephen says, we've clearly have to have accountability. But my concern is the actual 3.3 million. As you say, a third of the budget is now committed to a monitoring round. Now, we've seen the dogs dinner we had in June for a monitoring round. And my expectation is that October won't be much better. So the viability of the whole organisation is probably under question. So whilst we have to maintain with the monitoring and all the rest of it, we have to be realistic and think, is this really going to affect the service as a whole?
Well, as I understand it, if nothing came out of October monitoring, they sit with a budget of 10 million and they have commitments, including to groups, to the value of 10.8 million. So they're going to have to go back to groups and say, we cannot give you what we have promised you, and that means groups are going to have to lay off key staff, potentially close. The implications are dire.
Viability is under question.
But I don't want to send a message out of here that is totally bleak, because, as I said, some of the principal members of the Northern Ireland Executive say that they are absolutely committed to a positive response to June monitoring, not necessarily to finding 3.3 million, but to a significant uplift in the current budget. Chris, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, Chair. I had mentioned it in the away day, and I still think that the scale of the issues are starting to suggest more than just our regular request for a report on this, and there may be scope, notwithstanding the issues of priority concern that we have, for an inquiry into victims and survivor services in Northern Ireland. Just putting that on record. I realise we've got a huge forward work programme.
This is my overall view. I think that if we're not very attentive, then either at the VSS level or at the departmental level, even though there's going to be some significant changes in there in terms of personnel, I think there's a risk that things will slide again. So I actually think that this is the time to be particularly attentive. I'm not opposed to shared reports, although I'd rather see faces rather than see words.
Yeah, but we're getting these quarterly reports anyway, and I'm just conscious I don't want us to be detracting from frontline services. The acting chief exec and the acting chair are both back in circulation at the end of the month, is that? Beginning of October. So we're asking for those two key operatives to come here as soon as possible for an oral briefing. And we will. Do you want to have officials coming in on the back of that day? Or do you want to have a week to reflect?
I think a week to reflect would be helpful.
I actually take a contrary view to that. I mean, I think that it's good to have both groups there on the same day. The departmental officials coming after service.
Yep.
And that gives you, there's continuity and there's opportunities.
Psychological thing.
Because if you wait a week, then
Well, I think the consensus is
Yep.
2 in the one day.
Yep.
Okay, any other issues that anybody wants to raise in terms of the VSS or victims more generally? Okay. Well, it was a major focus last term, and I think you as a committee rightly were credited with bringing forward some very positive changes. So I think it should be right at the top of our agenda for as long as it has to be, which will certainly be the next number of months minimum. Okay, thank you, members. Draft work programme is at page 358. There are no comments. Can I remind you about the financial scrutiny session that we are getting next week, which means we're going to start at 1:45. Assembly Research will come along and talk to us about financial scrutiny with some ideas on best practice. We're all content on a 1:45 start?
Agreed.
Thank you. Any other business?
Chair, can I make an apology next week?
Oh, George.
The Mavati will not feature.
Well, good luck. Okay. Thank you very much, members. Wednesday the 17th, 1:45 here in room 30. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.